Hello, everybody. This is the Absolute Football Podcast, and it is our sixth episode of our fabulous Women in Football series, which is in partnership with the amazing campaign Her Game Too. We do have another incredible guest this evening, but before we do introduce her, Sam, my co-host. I mean, it's been a while since we've podded together, and we've been on an actual interview with someone. How are you, and how's your week been so far?
I'm doing good. I'm excited to be on an interview episode again, and to be on the Women in Football series. I know how hard you've been working on it, so it's lovely to be on. Yeah, week's been good. Week's been good. As I said, sort of off air, a few back issues, but it's just it's wear and tear. I'm getting on a bit now, so but I'm excited to be on. Excited to be on with Beth because we did an episode over 2 years ago, I think, on the Women's World Cup, which is still one of our biggest ever viewed episodes. So excited to get to speak to Beth again. It's great.
I'm really excited as well because I went on that episode, so I felt like I had major FOMO. So I'm excited to join the party this time. But as I have mentioned, our guest for this episode is ESPN Liverpool correspondent. It's the fantastic Beth Lindop. How are you, Beth? How's your week been so far?
I'm great, thank you. Yeah, as I was also saying off air, I've had a little bit of a cold this week, so I've it's been a busy old week as well for Liverpool. Played 3 games in 7 days, so it's been it's getting to that point of the season now where the games are coming thick and fast and stuff. But it's been my day off today, and I've spent pretty much all of it watching football. So I've only got myself to blame really, because it's just sort of football all the time in my house really, but no, all good. I can't believe that was 2 years ago that I did the show. It's absolutely flown by. So delighted to be back.
Thank you so much as well for, obviously, you did mention it is your day off, for coming on here as well and talking to us. We do really appreciate it. But we are going to take it back right to the start and your journey in football. Where did your love of football first come from?
So it started really with my dad, as probably a lot of people. My dad is an avid football fan, an avid Liverpool fan, has been, pretty much his whole life. So when I was born, there wasn't really much of a choice, really. I was stuck in a Liverpool onesie, baby grow, and I was like, a few weeks old, and that was sort of it. That was my decision made for me. And yeah, I think the first game I went to was a Community Shield game between Liverpool and Man United in Cardiff. And I was maybe like 18 months old, and obviously have absolutely zero recollection of it. Apparently I slept through most of it. So I've obviously sort of started enjoying football a little bit more than I did back then. But yeah, sort of football for me for a long time was just sort of something that went on in the background kind of thing. My dad was going every week to the football, and so it was sort of a part of my life. But it wasn't really until I was a teenager that I really started taking a real sort of active interest in it, and ultimately ended up becoming my job. So I definitely got the bug for it.
Love that. Do you know what, though? I feel incredibly jealous, right? When everyone has the stories about, obviously, the dad getting him into football, and it's like the likes of Liverpool, and then he's my dad, who's caused me nothing but pain supporting Rochdale. As much as I love them, I do get a little bit jealous.
But that's, I am, I'm very lucky, and I think it is sort of the hand that you get dealt, isn't it? But ultimately, and I think that the nicest thing is being able to support a club that means a lot to you and your family and your friends, and that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So it's I'm aware that I'm very privileged to have been born into a family of Liverpool fans, but yeah, I mean, football is just about that connection with your club, isn't it? No matter which club it is.
Definitely. I know you did mention a little bit about the first game that you went to, but is there one specific game that you do remember? I won't say your first live match because I know you mentioned that one, but the first one you remember, and what kind of impact did it have on you?
I don't think, to be fair, I can't really pinpoint a specific game when I was sort of that made me think like, oh, I really want to, I love football so much. I think it was one of those things as a teenager, I just started going the match a little bit more, and it became something that I really enjoyed. I think the match that maybe made me think, I want to do it as a career, and I want to pursue it was probably Liverpool Barcelona in the Champions League, the 4-0. So I'd have been 18, I think, at the time, when that happened. And yeah, I was at that point. So my background, sort of growing up, I wanted to go into performing arts for a long time. That was the path that I wanted to sort of go down, and sort of did a little bit of a last minute U-turn and decided to go for journalism. And I think, that game and that sort of the feeling inside the stadium that night. I mean, I'm not quite sure I'll ever experience anything like that again, because it was just a crazy, crazy night. But I think, the emotion and passion involved in a game like that is it's like addictive, and you want to be involved in more and more of those nights, whether that be as a fan, whether that be sort of, as I'm lucky enough to be able to do now as a journalist as well. So yeah, that was a really special game, and definitely one that I think will probably till the day I die will be the craziest football match that I've ever witnessed.
Love that. Do you know what I found really quite cool as well? This is the 6th episode now that we've done, and we've had similar questions to this, and it's surprising how many people, whether it be like Gabby, who we had on, who's into football social media, whether it be Beth, who was physiotherapist. It's crazy because everybody started and wanted to be either a performer in performing arts or a gymnast as well. I feel like it's a little bit of similarities, so it's crazy.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I think a lot of people who are in like media in some way, shape, or form have that background, because
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of sort of transferable skills and like similarities in terms of, at the heart of what my job is. It's sort of telling a story, I guess. It's telling a story from a football match, whether that be in a written form or in a podcast or anything like that. So there are elements, I think, that are definitely transferable, because like you say, I know quite a few people who work in this industry and started off wanting to do sort of performing arts. So I think there definitely is a link there.
Love that. Were there any particular players you looked up to as a child, or any while watching Liverpool you were like, that's my favourite player and is your footballing hero?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is an obvious one, but Steven Gerrard was obviously the main guy when I was growing up, and even before I was, like I say, when I was a kid and football was like not even necessarily something I took a massive interest in. Steven Gerrard was still, the player that you knew and you loved, and he meant so much to Liverpool, the city, as much as the club as well. So yeah, I think him probably, and then I think, Fernando Torres when he was at Liverpool. I still remember sort of his song, and then Luis Suarez a few years later. So I think those three are the three that stand out. Sort of when I was growing up were sort of the three real sort of iconic players that I look back on and think like, wow, their time at the club was very special.
And from a woman's point of view as well, is there any role models that you have now? Obviously, working in the industry or watching the women's teams.
In terms of players, or
anyone.
Yeah, I think just like, that it's so nice now that there are so many. That still, it's still certainly something that hopefully as time goes on, there'll be more and more women working in sports media. But I think it's so nice to see that number growing. And I think, the sort of standout for me is Kelly Cates, who she is just an absolute pro, and does, she's so busy at the minute. Literally, you watch Match of the Day, she's on that. You watch Sky, she's on that. She's sort of crazy busy, but totally deserved in everything that she does. She's just so professional and has so much experience. And I think people like her, people like Gabby Logan, people who have been working in the industry for a good while and have so much knowledge. So from a sports media perspective, they're great. I think from a player perspective, Leah Williamson is just such a fantastic ambassador for the women's game and the growth of that, to have captained England to back-to-back European championships and also to not be afraid to talk. She's spoken out about sort of endometriosis and sort of other issues that are really sort of personal and almost like a little bit taboo. I think there's some sort of issues that are exclusively female that people maybe shy away from talking about or get a bit embarrassed about talking about. And I think, she's been great in terms of sort of trying to challenge that a little bit. So yeah, but I think both on and off the pitch, there's so many incredible women in the game, and it's just nice to see that number sort of continuing to grow.
And have you ever played football yourself, Beth? Is it always been watching and writing, or have you are you a secret centre midfield dynamo like Steven Gerrard?
You do not want to see me attempt to play football. And I always say if I had to play football in front of any of the players that I sort of write about for a job, I would be out of a job straight away, because I just, yeah, it's terrible. And to be fair, no, I think, and again, I think that's the nice thing now is I think for young girls now, playing football isn't like a weird thing. Like that's, there's women's teams and it's cool almost. It's cool to like look at what the Lionesses are doing. And, I think for one of my favorite things is sort of when you see Lionesses games and you see in the crowd, not just young girls, but young boys, because I think that's just as important to have sort of normalize for them that women play football. And if they have a girl in their football team, that's not weird, that they're not any less, they're not any, that there is, women can play sport too, girls can play sport too. So I think when I was a kid, that was not really as much of a thing. I think, there weren't that many girls that played football. A lot of the girls did dance and singing and performing arts. And like I say, that was what I did for a long time. And I love that. And I don't wish that I hadn't done that. But I think it's nice now that young girls have that option and there's more opportunities. So yeah, I maybe did a couple of football sessions when I was a kid, but not an awful lot. And yeah, I sort of think it's probably too late for me to try and become the next Steven Gerrard, I fear.
I think many people have tried to be the next Steven Gerrard and failed, to be fair.
Myself included.
So you mentioned about that Barcelona game and that kind of that love for football coming through in terms of watching and then turning from performing arts. Is that when journalism first came on your plate seriously as your radar, or was that kind of in your mind anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I'd always enjoyed sort of writing and sort of when I was at school, sort of English and sort of storytelling and creative writing and everything like that was sort of my favourite thing. So I'd always sort of, thought that could be an option for me as a career, but I didn't quite know what form that would take. And yeah, so then when I was sort of like 17, 18, I sort of went through the audition process for a lot of like drama schools, which if anyone has ever done that, can be quite brutal. And yeah, and I've sort of hated that whole process because it's just so demoralizing sometimes, and there's so much rejection. And so while all of that was going on, I was starting to think, as much as I love performing, this sort of whole lifestyle for me, I'm not quite sure if that's what I want to do. And so, yeah, I probably had started maybe when I was about 17, 18 to think, what if I don't do performing arts, what could I fall back on? And journalism was always something that I thought that maybe I would like to do. I think maybe then wasn't until I got to like 19, 20 that I was really like sports journalism is the avenue that I wanted to go down. And even while I was at university, I sort of flirted with the idea of doing different types of journalism, but yeah, sort of by my third year of uni, I was fairly set, like that was the path that I wanted to go down.
And so do you remember the first piece you had published and how it felt to have your name in print against it?
Yeah, so I think it was probably when I was in my third year of university, I did a little bit of work experience with the Liverpool Echo on the sports desk, and had a piece published on their website, and that was just really surreal. I can't remember what the piece actually was, but it was just some sort of sports story, and like growing up sort of in the Merseyside area, the Liverpool Echo was like, it's an institution really. It was like my dad had bought it every night growing up, so sort of to see your name on associated with that publication, it was really proud moment. And then I did sort of various things when I worked for Reach, who own the Echo and the Mirror, and a couple of bits on the Lionesses that got put into print for the Mirror. And again, that sort of feeling of going into a supermarket and being able to pick up a newspaper and your name is in there. It's still, it's still something, sort of maybe I'll do it less so now with my current job, but it's still, as much as newspapers are maybe not, that they're viewed in a different way than they maybe used to be. I think it's still such a proud moment when you go and you can pick up a newspaper and see your name in print. It's always a really special feeling.
Yeah, I can imagine it's something special, and then led you, obviously, to, as you said, your career to develop. And is there a particular moment when you thought, yes, actually, I can really make it in this industry, and I feel I have my place?
Yeah, I'd say so. So I did, like I said, I did a little bit of work experience while I was at uni with the Liverpool Echo on their sports desk. And then I also did a bit of work experience with the Echo's news desk as well. And at that point, I knew that I wanted to do sport, but I got the opportunity to go into the newsroom and do a little bit on news as well. And I thought, it's a good opportunity to go in and meet people and sort of introduce myself. And sort of a couple of weeks later, I was just sort of finishing up at uni, and they the team at the Echo on the news desk sort of got in touch and said, we've got a job coming up in news, would you be interested in interviewing for it? And again, at that point, I sort of knew that I wanted to do sport, but it was just a really good opportunity to work for a really well-established news brand. And so I interviewed for the job. Fortunately, they gave it to me. And so I did sort of about 6 months doing local news, which was really, it was a tough grounding. It's hard, it's hard work. And some of the people who work in local news are the most dedicated, hard-working journalists that I know. So that was a really good grounding, I think. But then after that, I moved on to sort of the women's football team at Reach and started covering the WSL. And I think sort of once I've been in that job for a couple of months and got into the swing of sort of going to news, to press conferences, going to games, and sort of when that is your week, it was sort of, just remember thinking to myself, like, oh my goodness, like my job is actually getting paid to watch and write about football. So I think once I'd sort of settled into that role a little bit, that was the first time I was like, oh, this is a career, and I'm sort of, it's still very early days, but I'm sort of making a career out of it. And again, that was a really special feeling because, I know a lot of friends and family do jobs that, they don't necessarily love. They don't necessarily, they have good days and bad days. And of course, there's days in my job where, things don't go well or whatever. But 99% of the time, I love what I do. And I'm so fortunate to be in that position. So yeah, but I think once I'd started covering women's football for a little while, that was when I started to think, there is really a path for me to be able to do this.
I love that. I really love that. And also, you are now Liverpool correspondent at ESPN, which I think is absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. I guess it does change from time to time, but what does a typical working week look like to you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's an important point. It does change a lot, and I think that's something that is that I really enjoy about my job, because literally no 2 days are the same, no 2 weeks are the same. But yeah, so for example, this coming week, so I've got so there'll be like a press conference tomorrow ahead of Liverpool's game on Tuesday. So you'll go down to the training centre and you'll speak to the manager, and again, that's sort of one of those things that you sort of it becomes part of your weekly routine. But then when you actually stop and think about it, you're like, wow, this is actually quite a cool thing that I get to do in my job, that to come down here and speak to the manager. And then so Tuesday will be a game. So on a sort of a match day, I'll get down to the stadium sort of maybe 2-3 hours before a game just to do prep and sort of go through all my notes and everything like that. And then you sort of cover the game. I tend to write sort of a 800 to 1,000 word piece on each game. So you sort of try and get as much of it done before the final whistle as possible.
Yeah.
Covering Liverpool this season, it's not very often that I've been able to do that, because they've scored in pretty much every game really late on. So it's a lot of scrapping and rewriting things. And then after a game, you'll do sort of post-match stuff. So again, you'll go to a press conference with the manager, or you'll go to the mix zone where the players come through and try and convince as many of them to stop as possible. Again, it's a lot easier said than done, because most of them, the last thing they want to do is speak to us. But yeah, and then sort of, again, with the way that games fall at the minute, where the games are coming thick and fast, it's sort of by Friday there'll be another press conference, Saturday another game. So I'm travelling down to London on Saturday for Crystal Palace against Liverpool. And again, those away days can be super long, because you're leaving, maybe probably leave my house at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning and probably won't get home until midnight. And so it's long days. but again, it still doesn't feel like a proper job sometimes. So it's I'm very, very fortunate.
I love that. I know you've mentioned a couple as well, but is there a particular story or a particular game that you really have enjoyed working on?
Wow. I mean, there's so many, and like Liverpool this season, you know, pretty much every game has been crazy.
Yeah.
You know, I think some teams, you know, you have those crazy last minute winners, you know, maybe once a season. Liverpool have already done it about 5 times. So it's been, you know, again, you sort of pinch yourself when you realize that you're covering this crazy football club sometimes. I think in terms of great games that I've covered, I suppose actually over the summer I was covering for ESPN because I still do the odd bit of women's football stuff. So I was out in Switzerland for a few weeks covering the Euros for ESPN, the women's Euros. And I covered Switzerland's final group game. And they were, I think they were playing Finland. And they scored late on to qualify for the knockout stages for the first time in the history. And obviously, as the host nation, you know, the fans were just the reaction in that stadium and the emotion, what it meant to the players, what it meant to the fans. To see something like that, where it feels bigger than football, you know, it felt like a real moment for the sport in general, and for it to be taken seriously, I guess, in its host country was really special. So I think that's something that will stay with me for a long time, is being there to sort of see that moment. And then I think, you know, from a Liverpool perspective, the Liverpool-Tottenham game, where Liverpool clinched the title last season, they beat Tottenham 5-1, and yeah, pretty much everyone connected with the club, you know, manager, player, fans, other journalists, has said that day will never be beaten in terms of the emotion and how special it was. And I think it felt like there was a lot of expectation placed on that day, because it was, you know, Liverpool had obviously, they'd won the title a few years prior but it was in COVID, so there were no fans in the stadium. So it was the first time since 1990 that they'd won the title in front of fans. So, you know, for a generation, 2 generations really, hadn't seen Liverpool win a title in front of fans. So it was like, you put so much pressure on a moment like that, and you think, you know, what is it going to be like? And, you know, from the build up to right at the end of the day, it was just such a magical day, and to be involved, even in a very, very small way, sort of writing about it and covering it, was really special.
One thing as well, you need to come to a Dale game, because if you're a lucky charm for late goals, I need you for the rest of the season.
How are you faring at the moment? How's the season been so far?
We're doing all right so far, to be fair. I personally thought I'd invite you because I don't think you'd want to go with Sam to a game, because obviously he's a Manchester United fan. So yeah. I don't think you'd want any late goals for Sam.
Yeah, against us probably is more likely at the minute. So, and so you said about sort of covering big games, enjoyed covering big games. How do you prepare for that? Is it kind of stats, narrative, or sort of you're both, and then sort of trying to judge which way it might go?
Yeah, I think there's obviously different ways of covering games. Sort of one thing that I think, you know, in sports media in general, that has sort of shifted a lot over the past few years, has been sort of the conventional sort of match report doesn't exist that much anymore. I think, you know, the days where it was very much like this happened, then this happened, then this happened. There's a lot of places now that don't do that, because I think there's a recognition that, you know, most people have watched the game, so they don't necessarily want a sort of a blow-by-blow account of everything that happened. It's maybe more about a narrative and telling a story, and that's something that I really enjoy. I think, you know, going back to sort of coming from a background of performing arts and things like that, I think, you know, that ability to sort of take readers on a journey kind of thing is something that I really like. So so I'll tend to sort of get a few stats and things that can be fed in generally before the game, but I think, you know, sometimes you end up scrapping a lot of it because it's not relevant. And I think sometimes you can go into a game thinking, you know, I know exactly what the story is going to be in this game, and then it's something completely different. You know, I was covering Newcastle, the Liverpool-Newcastle game last month, and obviously so much of the talk coming into it was about Alexander Isak, and the hostility between Liverpool and Newcastle at that point, and whether Isak would sign for Liverpool. And then the story ended up being 16-year-old Rio Engamoa, who no one had been talking about coming into the game. So sometimes you just sort of have to wait a little bit. And it was sort of the same last week. I went to Burnley, as a lot of my colleagues did, anticipating we'd see Alexander Isak make his debut, and he wasn't even in the squad. So again, you can plan and you can have statistics and an idea, but a lot of the time it is about just sort of being in the game and thinking of what things you can sort of hook the game onto. So sort of, for example, covering the derby this weekend, the Merseyside derby, my piece ended up being about Ryan Gravenberch because he was brilliant, and it was sort of focusing on his performance. And I'm super lucky at ESPN that we have a team that's sort of helping us as we're writing, so I can say, I can drop them a message and say, can I get the numbers from his first half performance or the stats from his season so far, and they're able to sort of do that and then send me it, and I can sort of wrap it all in. So I'm really lucky that I'm able to have people who can do that and help with graphics and things like that to sort of give the story a little bit more oomph. But yeah, I think for covering Liverpool, you very quickly learn that you can prepare as much as you like, but they will find some sort of way to surprise you in the end.
Yeah, so you have to, I suppose, manage it as it goes along. Well, we need that on the pod, Charlize. I love a random stat, as you know, on the Premier League pod. So to have someone behind, I'd be like, give me the most random stat you can chuck at me. Would be brilliant. Do you still get like pinch me moments as well, that you're sitting in the press box at Anfield? You say like that you're sort of talking to the manager and all of this. Does it come often, or is it kind of becoming more sort of part of the day to day now?
I think it does become a little bit more part of the day-to-day, because ultimately it's your job. And like I say, sort of this week I've done sort of 3 games in 7 days, and you just sort of get on with it, and it does become sort of normal. But you do have those moments, and I think it's important to have those moments because I'm, as I've said, I'm consider myself very, very lucky to be doing this job, because it's, for so many people, it's a dream job. And, I've worked hard to sort of get where I am, but I also know that I've maybe had a little bit of luck along the way, and been in the right place at the right time at times. And yeah, it's just so much fun. And I think sometimes it's important to just sort of stop and remember that. And it's sort of like the Community Shield. At the start of the season, I was working, covering that for ESPN, and we had the sort of the broadcasting rights in the States, so we sort of did the post-match interviews. So I was sort of doing the post-match with Virgil van Dijk, and again, you just sort of, it's one of those things where you just stood there and you think, like, gosh, like 2-3 years ago, I could never have imagined that this would be my job. It's it's crazy. So you do still have the pinch me moments, I think, and I think it's nice. I think I'd like that to happen, as for as long as possible, because I think, hopefully I've got a nice long career ahead of me, but I think it's nice always to remind yourself that, ultimately this is something that we love, and we do it because we love it and enjoy it, and we're very lucky to do it. So I think it's important to have those moments sometimes.
What is the biggest misconception that people do have about sports journalism?
Probably that it's like a glamorous job. It's really, really not. The amount of times sort of you get kicked out of stadiums afterwards, and you're ending up sort of sat on a cold floor somewhere trying to finish your match report, or the Wi-Fi's on the blink in a stadium, so you've got to like type it on your phone. And it's a very cool job in a lot of ways. And I suppose sort of from the outside looking in, like, you see the cool things, and you see, you get to travel, and you get to you go to all of these cool places, and that is true. And I've been fortunate enough, sort of even during my time with the ESPN, to go to a lot of really cool places. But again, a lot of the time, you go from an airport to a hotel to a football stadium back to an airport, so you don't really get to sort of live the life of luxury while you're away and things like that. It's still very much work orientated. So yeah, I think there is probably, it's probably not as glamorous a job as maybe some people think it is, but it's still very fun and still very enjoyable most of the time.
And say football journalism, kind of the history of football journalism, I suppose, is very male dominated for a long period of time. What challenges have you faced as a woman in that industry?
Yeah, I mean, I'm very, very lucky in terms of, the vast majority of my colleagues are male, but they are great, and they have never once made me feel inadequate or in any way sort of not on an equal playing field with any of them. They have sort of accepted me into the fold, and they don't treat me any differently than they would treat each other. And sometimes that means I'm the butt of a joke, but I'd rather it be that way, because I think that's and I can give it back and I can take it, and it's it's nice. And I think so yeah, I'm really, really lucky that I've got really good male colleagues who've become friends, I guess. And I know if I need help or support, I can go to them. So I've been very, very, very lucky in that regard. I think the biggest challenge is probably sort of, especially in the age of social media, you do sometimes get comments about your appearance, or about maybe inappropriate comments, or the most common one is people just saying, like, why is a woman commenting on male sports? I literally did a podcast the other day for work, and like the top couple of comments were like, why is a woman talking about a man's sport? And it's just, you just look at that and you just think, some people will never get it. They will never understand that, I don't think gender should ever make a difference. I think if you like something and you're knowledgeable about it, you're qualified to talk about it. But yeah, so I think sometimes I've sort of got a little bit better at like not reading comments or not taking them to heart. But sometimes you do see the odd couple, and you just makes you roll your eyes a little bit. And obviously some people, especially being a woman in sports media, you do sometimes get the odd comment that does really get you down or makes you frustrated. So I'd say that's probably the most difficult thing. But again, having that sort of network of male colleagues and female colleagues as well, but that support network around you, I think, is really important.
And have you noticed more of a sort of positive change in kind of recent years? Have you noticed that from when you sort of started journalism to sort of now that there is an improvement?
Yeah, I think so. I think there definitely is. I think one thing that's really nice is that I've had quite a few sort of female students like message me over the past couple of years to say that they're in uni and they maybe want to speak to me for a project that they're doing or whatever, and then you'll speak to them and they'll say, I want to get into sports journalism and things like that. So I think outwardly, in terms of sports media, there looks like there's a lot more women in sport now, and there is on TV and on the broadcast side, and that's great. I still think probably in the written press that's not quite translated yet. I think there is still it's still massively weighted in towards men, but that's not necessarily the fault of anybody. I think it's just mainly because, going back years and years, women didn't feel like this was an option. And I think that's why it's so nice now when you see, young female students who want to go into sports journalism, because hopefully now in 5-10 years, those numbers will keep on growing. And I think, there's so many initiatives now that are geared at getting not just women, but people from ethnic minorities and different sexualities and everything like that into the sport. So I think it's it's great, and it's that inclusivity, I think, is growing all the time, even though there is still work to do.
I know one of our WSL team members, Chloe, she does a lot for Everton. She's obviously a student, and she likes to follow, obviously, in a job and footsteps like you, Beth. And it's just amazing to see, because like you said, it is so associated with obviously male dominated, and you only ever used to see on like TV and stuff as well, when you'd be doing the interviews, the managers and the players, it was always the men asking the questions. And it's so refreshing now to see the likes of you and the likes of other people getting involved, which is absolutely incredible. So you're doing a fantastic job. Just wanted to put that there.
Thank you very much.
Do you feel a responsibility as a visible woman in football media to inspire others?
I'm not sure about a responsibility. I think, first and foremost, I'll just try and do my job to the best of my ability. But I think, if that if one person looks and thinks like, oh, you know, they're maybe slightly inspired, it's still weird to think that anyone would feel like that. But I suppose sort of for me, when I was sort of coming through, you look at people and you do get inspired by them. And, you know, I'm lucky now that actually a lot of the people, men and women that I used to look up to are now called colleagues. So it's, you know, it's really nice, and it shows, I guess, that it can be done. It's not, you know, it's not this crazy faraway dream that people can go and get into this industry. It is possible. And yeah, I'd just like to think that, you know, my work is of a good level, and that I sort of represent myself in a good way. And hopefully if that makes anyone sort of want to feel like they can get into football, then that's great. And the more women, the better.
This is one of my favourite questions I'm about to ask now. I've asked it to every single person. It's one of my favourites. But what advice would you give to a young female, or just a female in general, that did want to follow in your footsteps?
I would probably just say, first of all, have confidence in yourself, have faith in yourself, because it is a really tough industry, whether you're a man, whether you're a woman. It's, you know, it's competitive. There's obviously only sort of a finite number of jobs, and you know, it is hard, especially like the industry at the minute. It's just evolving all of the time, and so it is hard, and there is rejection, and there is competition. So I think first and foremost, just back yourself. You know, sometimes you might face criticism, you might face, you know, idiots in comment sections who are just being very ignorant and things like that. But I think, you know, if you back yourself and you feel like you've got the talent and you've got the ability and you're prepared to put in the hard work, then, you know, why shouldn't you have confidence in yourself? Why shouldn't you think that you're capable of being part of this industry? So I think that's probably the biggest one. And then I would just probably say take all of the opportunities that come your way. Like I say, when I first started out, I did a lot in news, and I, you know, I don't think I would be doing the job I'm doing now without having had that grounding. I think in terms of, first of all, sort of the education that it gave me, and also in terms of the people that I met, you know, it was played a massive part in me getting into sport. So I think, you know, sometimes whether it be work experience, whether it be, you know, maybe a job or something like that, I think, you know, any opportunity you get to maybe give yourself a little bit of a foothold in the industry, then take it and work hard. And yeah, I think that's probably the biggest one. Just work hard and believe in yourself.
Honestly, every time I ask that question, I love every single answer. I need it on a loop for every time I'm having a down day. Just inspirational quotes by amazing women.
Yeah, on a t-shirt.
Yeah, or a quote book.
Yeah.
I'll ask everyone's permission. That's the next thing we need to do, Sam. Obviously, we have covered a lot about the men's game in this show so far, but obviously you do a lot for WSL as well and women in football. What excites you the most about WSL right now?
I think just sort of the level and how much it's constantly improving. You know, we had over the summer sort of the first £1 million footballer in Olivia Smith going from Liverpool to Arsenal, and that record very quickly got broken. I think it got broken twice over the summer. But I think, you know, constantly seeing the level improve and the standards improve on the pitch and off the pitch as well, in terms of you know, what's available to the players. I mean, Liverpool, for example, moved into Melwood a couple of years ago, which used to be the men's training ground, and it's just the most, you know, fantastic environment. It's got absolutely everything, state of the art, amazing pitches. You know, we speak to people who were, you know, playing for women's teams 20 years ago, they couldn't have dreamed that people now would be given that opportunity. So I think seeing that become more of the norm, and you know, the professionalism become, you know, continually improving, the standards continually improving is really exciting. And I think, you know, the women's game is on a upward trajectory, and long may it continue.
From a journalist point of view as well, did you think that any situations or any stories in the women's game, could you think of any that deserved more media attention?
I think in terms of individual stories, I just think I really like to see those stories about issues that affect women exclusively being talked about. I mentioned Leah Williamson earlier talking about endometriosis, and quite a few clubs now have done like initiatives where they've changed the colour of the shorts from white, because if women are on the period, then they maybe don't want to play in white shorts. And it's something that I think we're getting better at seeing those stories in the media, but I think the more that they can be talked about, the better, because I think things like that, they do sometimes get swept under the carpet, because it's like, oh, it's a bit embarrassing to talk about being on your period or having endometriosis or anything like that. But I think, ultimately it is a massive part of being a woman in women's sport. And I think, spotlighting those issues is really important. But I think in general, what's really encouraging now, and, we do it at ESPN, or, if you look at the BBC or Sky or whatever, like you'll go onto a homepage now and the women's stories will be mixed in with the men's. And I think that's really important, because male football fans of men's football, they might not necessarily even click on the story, but even sort of just being conscious of like a headline or the amount of sort of men that I know over the past couple of years who've said to me, they've mentioned a women's player and they know who she is. And that sounds like such a basic thing, but I think even sort of 5 years ago, that wouldn't really have happened. And I think sort of that comes from that assimilation of having women's sports just become part of these conversations that we have about sport in general is really important. And yeah, it's nice to see that that's becoming more and more frequent.
That's evolving from what you're saying there, Beth, with men becoming more aware of the women footballers, women's the game. So one of the communities I converse quite a lot with is the football manager community, or sort of new football manager games coming out, and they've got women's football for the first time coming out in this new game, which is gonna be very exciting. So, for some of you, have you got any tips, any players or any teams from the WSL to be keeping their eye on? I'll get a short list down here.
I'm a massive fan. I mentioned her earlier, but I'm a massive fan of Olivia Smith, who left Liverpool over the summer to join Arsenal. She was only at Liverpool for a season, and just was, with the greatest of respect to the rest of the squad, because there's some really talented players, but she was just miles above everybody else, on the pitch most of the time that she went out to play, and she's made a cracking start to life at Arsenal as well. So, yeah, if anyone wants to, or if you've got her in your fantasy WSL teams, then yeah, I'm sure she won't disappoint this season.
She'll do you well. And obviously, off the back of another Lionesses European victory that we've had over the summer, moving and continuing on that kind of growth, how important do you think is local coverage for the growth of women's football?
Yeah, massively important. That was one thing when our sort of women's football team got set up when I was at Reach. We tried to really do it, and it was having that regional coverage. And I think we had maybe 6 regional reporters at that when we first started out. And there's been sort of reshuffles and things like that, so it's maybe not quite the same now. But I think the more coverage you can get of local, of your local grassroots game, women's game, and local clubs, because the WSL is fantastic, but there's only 12 clubs. There's clubs further down the divisions that equally deserve spotlighting, and there's some amazing stories that come from those teams. So I think making sure that people know who their local women's team is and where they play and when they play is really important, because if you have a quiet Saturday or Sunday afternoon and you've got your women's team playing 10 minutes down the road, you might not even know about it. But if there's a bit of media coverage and you see it and you go down, then that might be how you get the bug and people get into it. So I mean, one really nice moment for me was so I flew back from Switzerland during the knockout stages of the Euros. I was just doing the group stages really, and my flight home was the day that England played Sweden it would have been the quarterfinals, and literally got off the plane and like stood in the queue for like passport control, and like every other person had the match on the phones and like was talking about it. And it was just a complete sort of mixed, like it was some people who you might look at and think, oh yeah, well, they're women's football fans, but just sort of normal people in the same way people would talk about the men's team. And that was one of the first moments where I really was like, wow, like this is, it's a really big deal, and people are really buying into it. And I think having that coverage is hopefully will continue to move things in the right direction.
Definitely. Hopefully this, as you say, that's continuing on and will continue to sort of to promote the women's game so much more and on local level. Moving into kind of Liverpool and Merseyside now, obviously such a unique football city, a very unique and fantastic culture as well. How does that shape your reporting with, say, being from Liverpool and all of those kind of unique cultural aspects?
Yeah, I mean, it is a great city. I'm obviously very biased, but I think it is a great city, and the same with Manchester as well. I've got, even though there's not an awful lot of love lost between Liverpool and the Manchester teams, I think
heard about it. Yeah,
I think there's so many similarities between the cities. I think they're both very proud cities, full of people who just absolutely worship their football teams and care so much about the football teams. And I think that there is almost an element, there's a real sort of social aspect, I think, to go into the football in Liverpool, as there is as there is everywhere. But, I think, the fans really they really buy into this family feel. I think the clubs, both Liverpool and Everton, have. And so I think sometimes being able to tell those stories about the squad, about the individual players, that can sort of make people identify even more with them is something that is always good. But yeah, I just think as a city, it's a great city to cover football. I think the Northwest, there's some great clubs down south, but I think the Northwest is probably in my biased opinion, I think it's probably one of the best places to cover football, because
I agree.
I think you can't. The Northern football fan is just, they're all so passionate and love the football club so much, and yeah, so it's always, I think it's a privilege to be working in a patch that is so, where people love football so much.
Absolutely, and everybody knows about the amazing atmosphere at Anfield, and obviously Everton, with what was Goodison Park, now gone to the Hill Dickinson Stadium as well, and the passion for the men's teams. What's the atmosphere like for Liverpool and Everton women games?
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing actually that I always find slightly frustrating, because as I've said, I think Liverpool and Merseyside is such a mad football city. You'd be hard pressed to find a household in the region that doesn't support one of the two clubs, and they will follow the club home and away and all around the world. And I think that passion hasn't quite transcended into the women's game. And for example, I was at the Merseyside derby, the WSL one, a couple of weeks ago at Anfield. I think there was maybe about just shy of 12,000 fans there, which isn't bad. It's more than maybe they get most weeks, but also it was an international break. It was Liverpool against Everton. It was at a decent time, and I just think I would love for the women's team to be supported with the same level of passion that the men's team are. And saying that, some of the fans that follow the women's teams are so passionate. It's just absolute. They adore the clubs, and they travel around the country following them. So, but I think to see more and more people considering how big a football city it is, and how much people here do love the football, and also sometimes how hard it is to get tickets for games, for the men's games. It's so hard to get a ticket for a Liverpool men's game, and especially with Everton moving into this new stadium now, everyone wants to go there. So I think, hopefully people, especially off the back of the Euros and things like that, if they've got a free afternoon, can go and can support the women's teams, because I think, they're both great. They've both got some great players, and they're a part of the club at the end of the day. And I think if you support the club, it's nice, even if it's not every week, if it's just, once in a while, to be able to get down and show your support.
Yeah, definitely. And do you think, obviously we've had a lot on the kind of men's side with PSR recently, and that kind of affecting the way that some clubs are handling and managing kind of the women's clubs as well. Do you think the men's clubs are doing enough at the moment to support the women's sides?
Yeah, I mean, I think one thing that's been really nice actually is Everton over the summer were able to sort of, for the first time in a long time, really invest in the women's team, because the club as a whole has been under so much uncertainty the past few years, with sort of the change in ownership and points deductions, PSR, and all of that. So I think it's nice now. There's a real sense at Everton that the club is really being backed, which is really, really nice. I think Liverpool, I'd like them to maybe do a little bit more. I think they did really, really well a couple of years ago in terms of they bought Melwood for the women's team, and they really sort of put a lot of money into that. And they've sort of now got their own sort of designated stadium at St Helens, which again they've put a lot of time and effort into making that a real home for the women's team. But I just think I think if you look at what Arsenal are doing, for example, with their women's team, and I think Arsenal are the best in the business at sort of making it feel like it's one club, and sort of making sure that when they do content, it's not about having sort of men's content and women's content. They sort of very often they'll sort of mix things together, and they'll do things with both the men's and the women's players. And again, it just sort of goes back to that idea of sort of making sure that people know who they are and start to feel a bit of a connection with them. So I think you know, both clubs I think are well supported, but I still think there's always room for more and more support from the men's side of things, because you know it's there is still a massive gulf in terms of the finances and things on the men's and the women's game. So I think, you know, every effort that can be made to sort of promote the women's team, you know, the better.
Yes, and certainly is. And do you remember any standout women's football moments from Merseyside that stuck with you? Something that immediately comes to mind as a moment?
I mean, basically every Merseyside derby at Anfield at Everton seem to win. Genuinely, Liverpool are cursed, I think, when it comes to playing Everton at Anfield, and they've never beaten them there. This year looked like it could be the year that they were going to do it. They scored first. They'd never scored a goal against Everton at Anfield, and then they went on to lose 4-1. So all of those games, whenever Everton come to Anfield, it's always, you know, from an Everton point of view, it's great to watch because they always seem to play some of the best football there. But yeah, I think it was, you know, it was really nice, really special a couple of years back to see Liverpool get finish in the top 4, which you don't actually get any tangible reward from in the women's game, because it's only the top 3 that get Champions League football. But in terms of a mark of their progress, it was only the second season back in the WSL, having spent a couple of years in the Championship. And in terms of budget and everything like that, they were sort of miles behind some of the other clubs that they were up against, and they sort of really defied everyone's expectations to do that. And I mean, that was thanks in no small part to the manager at the time, Matt Beard, who really sadly passed away yesterday. It was really, really sad news. But yeah, I think seeing the sort of the unity within that squad and the achievement that they were able to make collectively by making the top 4 was really great to see.
Definitely. One thing that I did mention with the podcast, and it's really, really incredible that we do have the support of Her Game too, and it is a partnership with them, which is honestly incredible. What does it mean to you personally, the campaign? Because it's something that obviously has grown from strength to strength, hasn't it, over the years?
Yeah, and again, I think it's encouraged so many women to feel empowered to support football and to not be afraid to express that support. And I think as well, you know, I've got a couple of friends who are sort of ambassadors of various clubs, and you know, for them as well, it's sort of in terms of the friendships that they've built through it. You know, with people from on the other side of the country who maybe that, you know, they might not have even met in person, but you know, through this sort of shared love and passion for football, even if it's for different clubs. You know, it's so nice to have that sort of connection with other women and that friendship with other women. Because, you know, speaking about all of the issues that women can sometimes face in football, whether that be as a fan or a journalist or whatever, I think, you know, there's always strength in numbers, and it's always nice to know that there's other people who share the same passion and are there to support you and things like that. So I think Her Game too is great at that and at connecting, you know, women in football in various different ways. So it's a great initiative, and as you say, goes from strength to strength every year, it seems.
It's crazy as well because it's literally started, and I'm ambassador for Rochdale, which is obviously amazing, but it's gone from like football to then football in Wales, football in USA, football in France, and then it's gone to cricket, to hockey, to rugby, and it's amazing. And like you say, it's just a whole community that support each other. And it's one of them things, like the group chat is absolutely crazy. Like, even if it's like, oh, I don't know what outfit to wear today, you've got so many other people. Or if you need support in any way, honestly, everybody's amazing. I know we did mention a little bit on the journalism side, but have you noticed a change in culture and a change in inclusivity since obviously the campaign has taken place? Sorry, tongue tied.
I do think so. I think there is, I think now it is. I would like to think that women now feel more comfortable going to football stadiums, and I think ultimately the goal is that it's not even an issue anymore. You don't even have to think about being a woman going, and I think you go in as a football fan, and I think we've seen that more and more over the years. I think it's still needed. I think there's still work to do. I think there's that there's still maybe among some fans an attitude that it is still very much a men's game, and so I think the continued sort of the campaigns that they run and the awareness and the collaboration with all the clubs as well is really important, and also just sort of to signpost people to, if they ever do have any issues, hopefully they don't, hopefully it's never needed, but I think just knowing that there are people who, if you do ever have an issue or you do ever feel uncomfortable, that you can go to, and they'll have your back is really important, and will hopefully encourage more people to go the game with the knowledge that there are people who can support you if occasionally things aren't the best.
What role as well would you say yourself and other female journalists play in making football more inclusive?
I think first of all, just showing that you don't need to be a man, you don't need to be from a certain background to be able to be successful in this industry. And I think the best way of showing that is just by sort of doing your job to the best of your ability. But I also think I was very, very, very lucky when I was when I was at uni and work experience and things like that, that there were I had people, male and female, who sort of gave me a bit of helping hand in terms of pointing me in the direction of people, or giving me opportunities. And so now I will always try, and sometimes it's hard because, especially sort of when it gets to like dissertation time, you get sort of an influx of people messaging saying, oh, I'm doing a project on this or that, and sometimes there can be quite a lot. But I think as much as I can, I'll try and help young women getting into the industry as best as I can, because I think, again, it's a competitive industry, but also I think it's much richer by having a real sort of diverse mix of people covering it. And so, anything that I can do to help any sort of young woman coming into the industry, I'd like to think that I do that as much as I can. And I know that, a lot of my female colleagues do the same thing. And it's always so nice to see more and more women sort of coming through the ranks, and hopefully that continues for a long time.
This is another favourite question of mine, by the way, just highlighting it. But if you could change one thing tomorrow to make football more welcoming for females, what would it be?
Oh, that is a very good question.
Just one thing to make it harder.
I think it would probably be sort of eradicating sort of social media accounts that just send really hateful messages to, I mean, it's not just to women, a lot of my male colleagues get it as well, but I think just in general as a society, it would be nice if there was something that those sorts of accounts that only exist to spread that kind of negativity weren't there anymore. I think that would be my one thing, and I think it would make football a much happier place for a lot of people.
It's always a profile as well. What doesn't make sense and has a picture of a footballer as their profile picture. Yeah. It's never a picture with their face on it. Never.
No. And I think, that's definitely something that, social media sites and things like that, hopefully in the future will start to clamp down on, because it's, it can be really hard. And I think, the less sort of hate and nastiness and everything that we have in the industry, the better.
Yes, it is. I think it's a nightmare across football, sport, and social media in general, isn't it? So I think, across the board, eradication would be great. As Char's kind of given me the closing question, which I think is another cracking question as well. If you could go back, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Oh gosh, some really good questions in here. I think to be fair, it's probably similar to what I said. You know, I'd probably just say believe in yourself, back yourself, have confidence that you are, you know, you're where you are because you've worked hard, and you know, don't ever feel sort of that you're less because you're a woman, or that you don't deserve to be somewhere, because you know, you get out what you put in, not just in this industry in life, I guess, but so the harder you work, the more good things that I think happen in the fullness of time. So that's probably my biggest piece of advice, is just keep believing, and I'm working hard.
I love that. I've literally been smiling throughout the episode, and I can admit now I do not have FOMO anymore because I've done an episode with you, Beth. I'm happy now. I am happy. But thank you so much, honestly. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on here tonight, and thank you for giving up your time, especially on your day off as well.
Oh, no problem. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Where can everybody find you if they want to keep up with the amazing work that you do?
So I am at, that's a good question. I'm at Beth _Lindop on Twitter. So so all of my work is usually posted on there, or the ESPN website. I've got a lot of very talented colleagues as well. So hopefully you can go and check all of that out.
Definitely do, everybody watching this. Go and check out Beth's work. It's incredible. And of course, Sam, thank you so much for being an amazing co-host tonight. Where can everybody find you on your football content?
Oh, you're welcome. It's a pleasure to be on, Char. You've been doing amazing stuff with this series, and I know it's something we've been sort of working on for a while in the pipeline. So it's nice to kind of get it out there. You can find me at Sam Absolute FBL, talking probably random football stuff that's going on. This weekend was good, but as this goes out next weekend, I won't be too positive because next weekend might be worse. But mostly on the Absolute Football podcast, Char, because we've got plenty going on, and we've plenty coming up.
We have a lot going on. And of course, if anybody does want to find me, I am SharXREFC. That is on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. My Her Game 2 stuff as well is Rochdale HGT on all of them socials. And of course, the main ones. And I do apologise to everyone watching this because it does mess up our layout. But we are the Absolute Football Podcast, and we did win Best New Content Creator at the Football Content Awards. As I say, every single pod, we are milking it until November. We are milking it. But on Twitter, we are Absolute Ball Pod, YouTube and TikTok, Absolute Football Podcast, TikTok, Absolute Football Pod, Instagram, Absolute Football Podcast _. Blue Sky, we have Absolute Football, and Facebook, the Absolute Football Podcast. We do have 4 live shows a week as well. As Sam mentioned, a lot of content going out. So the Absolute Non-League show, which is in collaboration with NL Fulltime, is on a Monday. We cover National League North, National League South. Sam and the team are on a Tuesday for Absolutely Premier League. Then Freya and Team Chaos, they have the Absolutely Women's Football show where they cover WSL and WSL2. And of course, I'm back. Sorry, everyone. I'm back on a Thursday covering all things lower league with the Rowdy Rabble, where we cover the EFL Championship, League One, and League Two. You can join us as a YouTube member, where you do get special perks, some really cool emojis, and some Meet the Team episodes where I can't give too much away, but maybe some of the team give out their deepest, darkest secrets. Who knows? You have to join to find out. But again, I just wanted to say thank you so much, Beth, for being part of it tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. And thank you to everybody that has supported this incredible Women in Football series. Hope you all have a lovely Sunday evening and a really good week. Bye, everyone.